Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start with the story in which an aggressive passenger was punished for his rudeness by our OP. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Are you threatening me? I am the Great Cornholio. Another bus driving story. I pull up to a stop about 6 in the morning. There's a guy smoking a cigarette and a few other people. Buddy with the cigarette takes one last drag, walks in, and exhales. Gee, idiot. He puts in his change and asks for a transfer. I tell him, you blew smoke in my bus. You can take a transfer on your way out. He says, no, I didn't. And smoke's still coming out of his mouth as he talks. I hold out a transfer and he takes it and sits down. Not today, buddy. I ask him a few more times and met with expletives. Fine. I hit the emergency button. I explain what happened, that he's refusing to leave. They come over the PA and tell him he needs to leave or they'll send special constables. He finally gets up and on the way out says, if I see you again, I'm going to smash your effing face in. Okay, you 100-pound scraggly little crap bird, game on. I decide to cover all my bases. I drive up the road, call the emergency line again, and explain that he threatened me. I go back to the division after my shift and submit a report of the whole ordeal. I go to the office and explain the report to my boss, telling him I don't feel safe, and ask him what I should do if I see him again. He says I can bypass the stop. I see him again the next day. I drive right by, hit emergency, tell them I had to bypass because I was threatened by someone waiting at the stop. I repeat this every day until he stops showing up. He even had the gall to submit a complaint. I get called to the office. My boss reads the complaint. I just say, that's the guy who threatened me. I put in a report and talk to you about it. Complaint gets ripped up without another word. People in their big effing mouths, I swear to God. And our second story. Unregistered vehicles must be covered. My first car was an '88 Jeep Wrangler that I bought off my brother in 2003. A Wrangler is a hell of a first car for a teenager, but there was a reason I could afford it. Neither my brother nor the previous owners had been kind. By the time I decided on a college 2 years later, the list of repairs needed was beyond what I was willing to put into it, not to mention parking fees. I decided I wouldn't be taking it with me. But it was a sweet ride and no one was ready to part with it, so my dad decided to park it on the side of the house for the time being. With the repairs not yet addressed, the Jeep was not getting driven, and a few months later we let the registration lapse. The very next day, we received an ordinance violation notice from the township. One of our noters had taken note of our tag and was waiting for the day they could report it. We had one retired neighbor that we didn't get along with, didn't hate the guy, but he had a lot of petty complaints, so we were pretty sure it was him. Well, we were upset, but my dad was ready to move a car out of the garage and put the inoperable Jeep in its place to appease the neighbor and put us in compliance. That's when I took a closer look at the ordinance and realized it specified that unregistered vehicles are not to be parked next to the house uncovered. No specific type of cover required, just some cover. So we went out back and got our dirtiest tarp, slung it over the Jeep, and pinned it down with rocks. Our reasonably nice, if somewhat rusty Jeep had been replaced by a mystery lump covered with a dirty tarp, and that was compliant. We were more annoyed that he'd called the township on us than anything else. After a few weeks of smug satisfaction, we did finally sell the Jeep. I don't live there anymore, but I don't think my parents have had a complaint since. Hopefully that neighbor crosses the street and talks to them about problems now. And our next story. Don't touch your documents? Okay, I'll let it pile up for you. I've been working in a company for about 8 months now. My job starts with me walking in admin, picking up a few documents that I'll need to work on for most part of the day, go back to my cubicle and actually work on those documents. The chick at the cubicle next to me is kind of a senior because she's been doing this job for the past 4 years. She was the one that trained me to do the job. Since day 2 of my job, I've had the habit of picking her documents and neatly placing it on her desk. I always show up before her. I need to be there from 8:30 a.m. She gets in at 9 a.m., so I didn't really realize nor care that she didn't know it was me every morning bringing her documents. Fast forward to mid-April. We barely speak to each other. She was just nice during my first week of training, and after that it was exclusively business. I'm fine with that. I still brought her documents every morning, except one day about 3 weeks ago, I mixed up my own documents with hers. She asked me, "How did this get in here?" To which I casually reply, "Oh, must have been mixed up when I brought them this morning." To which she blew up on me. She literally shouted at me to never effing touch her crap again. I should have gone to HR or something, but I never did. The next day, I picked my stuff and went to my cubicle. She showed up a half hour later with nothing on her desk. I thought she was going to pick it, but she did not. I'm guessing she assumed no document equals no work. Around 1 p.m., a clerk from admin came and gave him one document saying it's urgent. She worked on it for a few hours and it was time to go home. For the next few weeks, almost every morning, she'd be just sitting and browsing Facebook and crap till some clerk shows up with important/urgent document. Little did she know that the ones not deemed urgent were being piled in admin. Today, everything blew up on her. It was around 11:30 a.m. and the manager of our department walked to her desk with a pile of documents. He was closely followed behind with a clerk who was carrying an equally large stack. "What the F is this? What am I paying you for?" Her face was completely blank. I listened to the brief exchange. The manager was listing down all the lost revenue that happened because of her and asked her to follow him to his office. I was feeling so effing good. At noon, I went out to grab lunch. It was only about 1:30 that she returned, grabbed her bag, and left without saying anything. Was she fired? Based on the type of work I do, I wouldn't be surprised if she was fired, if indeed she didn't take care of all those docs. When I got back home, I received a letter saying I landed a job that paid much better. It's my dream job than the current one, so I don't mind sharing this story here that could possibly identify me because this situation is very specific. I did nothing wrong, and tomorrow I'll be handing in my 2 weeks' notice anyway. And our last story. Broke family finally gets money for central air conditioning. So we grew up quite poor. Any car we had was well past its due date, so Dad and I were under the cars most weekends. We did the one air conditioner in my parents' room with 3 kids sleeping on the floor most summers, but I and my brother just had hit our teen years, and that's a bit awkward, as you might imagine. Somehow, with extra work on weekends, fixing other people's cars at night, my dad scrapes together enough money for central air conditioning. We kids were freaking out, not having to sleep in Mom and Dad's room? Cool. So Dad calls a bunch of people and chooses XX to do the job. He needs 2/3 of the money up front to purchase the unit, blah blah. So my dad forks over the money and gets a receipt of some type, and we eagerly await Monday morning. And wait, and wait. Lots of phone calls, messages left, and questions asked. No responses. So this is before the Google area, but we managed to track down his office, and I'm a feisty 16-year-old who's filled with righteous indignation that this business screwed my parents. We show up to the building, go inside and up to his floor, and knock on the door. Nobody home. I look under the door. All I can see in the room is a phone and answering machine plugged into the wall. No other furniture in the room. Now I'm freaked because the money's gone. If the guy doesn't come back, how are we going to get our money? So then we go to the building manager to ask about the person who rents that office and told him our story. The guy couldn't care less, refuses to give out info. My dad thinks for a while, and when we get home, he calls a friend who he's done work for who may or may not have ties with a certain telephone company. My dad hands me a name of a guy who rents the office. From that, I went to the library to look up the house address of the person with this name. I go home and get my dad, and off we go. So you've got 2 very worked up, angry people ready to try and scare this guy into giving us our money back while we'd never actually be violent, but like to act it. Well, maybe. Pound, pound, pound on the front door. Ring, ring, ring. The door opens, and it's a little old lady who's suitably freaked out, to say the least. We're looking for ZZ of Company XX. We have business with him. She answers us with something that makes our blood boil. Oh, you just missed him. He got married and is taking his wife on a honeymoon to Hawaii for 2 weeks. He took our money for a honeymoon? Now, it was a lot of money to my folks, but I'm certain he needed more money than what it took from us to spend a couple weeks in Hawaii, so I go back to his office and post a sign on the door with my number on it, asking anyone to call if they've been suckered by this guy. It ended up being 5 or 6 people who called in the end. I probably missed some, as they may have already been there. So I go back to the little old lady and told her what her son had done and showed her the list of people who he'd robbed. I told her that he better call me the day he got back or I'd be giving her address to everyone and we'd all be looking for our money. ZZ returns, apologizes, and says he just needed enough to take his wife away on a honeymoon, like that was a great excuse. Begged for some time to get the money together. I give him a couple days. I was so proud to hand my parents their money back, and even more proud to write out the address and full name of the creep who ripped us off on his office door and called every number that had called me and told them too, so that everyone would have a chance at getting their money back too. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.